Okay, let's finish up. This part of the chapter, we're at the very end of chapter 5. We're about to move into chapter 6, where we look at procedures. But before we get there, I want to look at an approach to assembly language programming that many of you will use in industry before you'd ever write anything in all assembly language. So I want to show you a couple of techniques for this. Probably first explain why we are going to do this. So we mentioned at the very beginning of the semester that high-level languages are getting more and more efficient. Since that is the case, and I've got high-level languages that are getting more and more efficient, assembly language, which has always been the paragon of efficiency, this gap between the two narrows all the time. So what we want to do is, there's so many advantages for using a high-level language. Readability, maintainability, development. It's just so much easier. We can think much more conceptually at such a high level. But also debugging, and then operational, I mentioned maintenance. We want to keep as much in high-level language as we can. And here's the deal. While it is true that high-level languages are getting more efficient, they're not all the way to the level of efficiency that an assembly language is. So there's this little gap here. What we want to do is implement what we can in a high-level language and only write low-level languages for those things that we know we can do better. So that's essentially what we're going to be looking at. There are two different ways of doing this. First is inline assembly language code. This we won't use very often because it is specific to the platform, and we really don't want code that is that specific to the platform. I've highlighted in yellow what we need to be concerned with here. You'll note that there's a block of code, and it is prefaced by this __ASM. That tells the compiler that the following block is going to be in assembly language. So if I do __ASM, block of code, then I can insert what I need to inline directly in the high-level code. What we're going to be doing, though, is looking at calling assembly language functions from a high-level language. So we're going to do a couple before we get to that point, because with function calls we have a little bit of overhead. We've got calling conventions, we've got parameters being passed, how are they going to be passed, and things like that. So before we do that, we're going to look at a couple of examples, probably tomorrow or the next lecture, so that we can get a feel for how this is going to work. One of them, we're going to look for or count the number of E's. We are going to validate the hypothesis that if I know I have an English message, the preponderance or the majority of English characters that will occur first. I'm going to look for the high frequency character being an E, because that's the high frequency character in English, and so on. So we'll just validate that hypothesis there, but we're also going to do a sequential search. So we'll look at both of these in doing this in assembly language. So that's it for this. We'll do a lot more explaining in class. See you guys in class.